What's up guys? Welcome to my first review of an Apple product. If you're new, I usually review laptops and PC peripherals. I've always wanted to make a video on something Apple related. Since I've used their products for over a decade, I found cool ways to integrate PC hardware and Mac hardware in the past, and I've used Apple products for work. I just haven't had much time to share this with everyone, so I hope to start this off with an in-depth review on the iPhone 15 Pro. Before I start this review, I want to include some background information on where I'm coming from in the smartphone space, and to be transparent as to where my insights lie. My personal phone before this was an iPhone 12 Pro from launch. I used this phone for 3 years, and I felt like it was time for an upgrade. I also did not go blindly into purchasing this new phone, because I also have an iPhone 14 Pro Max, solely for work-related purposes. So I feel I have a good base of knowledge to share with you guys on what's different in terms of other consumers questioning whether they should upgrade to this year's model or not. In this review, I will talk about what's new from the previous model year, notable features and differences that should be mentioned coming from the 12 Pro, and aspects of the new lineup that I feel should be addressed before buying. Now, let's open it up. So, what's new? Let's start on the outside of the phone. The 15 Pro features a new aerospace-grade brushed titanium border, with contoured edges rather than stainless steel from previous years, making the phone noticeably lighter and a bit more premium feeling. There is a tiny bit of controversy surrounded by this new border, getting dirtier than stainless steel, but in comparison, and in my experience, they equally get fingerprints, and there isn't much you can do other than donning a case or wiping off the oils. The new Pros come in 4 familiar colors: black, white, blue, and natural. Not the most new or interesting colors, but I would have gotten blue no matter what else they came out with. The mute switch has also been replaced by an action button, which is essentially a macro button that can be mapped to perform a certain action on the phone. Personally, I like to have it mapped on my camera, but you can set it to run virtually anything with configuration through the Shortcuts app. One thing that Apple should have done to make the action button better is to include more actions within the button. I think there should be the ability to short and long press, double press, or triple press to be able to perform different actions. Hopefully this can be rolled out in a software update. The bezels on the phone have also shrunk. It's not that big of a deal, but coming from a 12 Pro, it's very noticeable. The display on the 15 is a 6.1 2556 by 1179 HDR OLED 120Hz always on display with a 2000 nit peak brightness. I'm glad to see brighter screens on phones, and it definitely helps with using the phone outdoors. On the Pro Max, the only difference is that the screen is larger at 6.7 inches, maintaining the 460 pixels per inch. Coming from a 12 Pro, this new dynamic island seemed gimmicky when it was first announced last year. But now that I'm using it in my personal life, I commend Apple on how they turned a setback into something that actually displays quality information and feels more like a feature. And finally, USB-C. The base model 15 utilizes USB 2.0 with dinosaur transfer speeds, while the Pro models feature USB 3.0 with transfer speeds up to 10 gigabits per second. This isn't new stuff, guys. In fact, given that the Pro model is marketed towards professionals and with a huge push for photography and cinematography, you'd think they would include a Thunderbolt protocol for even faster transfer speeds. But sadly, the Pros do not have Thunderbolt, no matter how much the Apple Hub, Sam Cole, or even Apple would like to mislead their audience. Now on the topic of misleading, Let's get into the new cameras and focal lengths. When Apple ended their keynote last Tuesday, many consumers were left confused as to how the iPhone 15 Pro Maxes were able to achieve 7 focal lengths with only 3 prime lenses. Are they digitally cropping the lenses, or is there more going on that Apple hasn't let on? The tech specs on the website doesn't seem to provide much information and even goes on to further confuse the customers about optical zooms and focal lengths. To summarize, it's all fancy words to just say Apple magic. Basically what's going on are a mix of hardware and software integration for creating fake focal lengths. There are only 3 true focal lengths on the Pro Max: a 13mm lens with a 12 megapixel sensor, a 24mm lens with a 48 megapixel sensor, and a 120mm lens with a 12 megapixel sensor. That's a lot of digital space between a 24mm and 120mm, and from what I've seen, it is noticeable. However, the regular 15 Pro has a 77mm telephoto lens instead of the 120, so the regular 15 Pro may be a better option for those who would use a 77mm more often. And I think Apple should have just added a 4th lens, or figured out how to include a variable zoom lens for a true optical zoom. But despite my gripes with the technicality of the Pro's camera system, I think Apple actually did a good job in fooling even me of mimicking 3 focal lengths within 1 prime lens. Except, it should be considered that there really isn't much of a difference between the 1x focal lengths, even from a photographer standpoint. I also want to commend Apple for allowing the recording of log and video capture. This is a content creator's dream, and I think the inclusion of log recording sets Apple ahead of the curve in their updated camera system, as well as the automatic portrait data processing in taking normal photos. These new additions are probably my favorite features out of the entire refresh. Now that we're on the inside of the phone, let's get everything out of the way. The new iPhone 15 Pros come with a rebranded A17 Pro chip. From Geekbench, the A17 Pro is 40% better in single-core scoring and 50% better in multi-core scoring when compared to the A14 Bionic and the 12 Pro. Compared to last year's A16 Bionic, the differences are as little as 14% better in single-core and 8% better in multi-core. Some have even speculated to say that the A16 Bionic is just an underclocked A17 Pro. I'll leave that to you guys to decide. In real-world performance, the Pro does feel faster, but I think it's an illusion due to the 120Hz ProMotion display that I'm not accustomed to. The Pro features a 3,274 mAh battery, and the Pro Max features a 4,422 mAh battery. Using the new iPhone, I can notice a world of a difference coming from a 3-year-old phone. At the end of the day of normal use, I still have about 20% left on the phone. Apple has also included a Wi-Fi 6E compatible network chip. This means that you'll be able to connect to Wi-Fi 6 enabled routers for close to tethered speeds. However, I and many others have encountered problems with connecting to the 5 GHz wireless channels on routers, which is what most people will be connecting to. At the moment, I'm getting Wi-Fi drops every few minutes throughout the day. I'm hoping this could be fixed in an iOS update, and it doesn't have to do with the actual network chip. Gaming on the new phone is actually pretty cool. It doesn't push out PC or even console level quality, but I do see phones entering the space of portable gaming and competing with a Nintendo Switch in the near future. And with a push for ray tracing gaming on this model, I was left impressed with the performance that I got out of it. Other than these new features, this phone doesn't seem too much of an upgrade from last year's, and that's because it's not. It's more of a refresh, and I'll go over why in a minute. So who should buy this phone? Those in the ecosystem. iPhones are definitely a cheap device. They are an acquired taste. They are basic in terms of smartphone features. I have owned and fell in love with iPhones ever since the iPhone 4. I'm not trapped in the Apple ecosystem like many are. I prefer to be in the Apple ecosystem. Their computers are next level for creative productivity that I can't even begin to explain the speeds that one can achieve with their workflows. My workload and personal life are integrated to create ease amongst all of my products. I have a PC that I love to use daily, but Windows and Android just can't compete with the seamlessness of owning all Apple products, and having an iPhone just complements all of that. Those who are due for an upgrade. I used to be the type of person to upgrade every year to a new phone, and after a while, It just felt pointless. I felt the same phone came out year after year, but if you wait 2 to 3 years for the next version, it will feel like a completely different phone. And that's what I think consumers are doing now. And Apple knows this. This is the reason Apple puts out yearly devices, not expecting everyone to go out and buy the latest phone every year, but instead to scoop up those who don't, those who are financially able. The iPhone 15 Pro is a pro phone. It's a luxury phone, and it's not cheap. Don't throw all your money at this thing. If these pro features aren't a necessity, and you barely have the means to justify this purchase, don't get it. There are other alternatives if you're in the ecosystem and are due for an upgrade. Get the base models or get the previous generation Pro models. I hate to see people who are in financial instability spending over $1,000 on the latest and greatest phones. You don't need these devices. If you don't meet all 3 of the criteria that I stated, I suggest not buying this phone. Now to give my rating. I love iPhones. This new design kept me happy with my purchase, but the real reason I waited 3 years for a new iPhone was because I wanted dark blue. So I give this a 10 out of 10.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.